it's Girls Camp. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Girls Camp podcast. I'm your host, Haley Rawl, and I am thrilled to be joined today by Tiffany Hemple. Welcome, Tiffany.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. You DM'd me. We've connected before, but when you DM'd me, you were like, I'm ready to talk about my story. I've just felt like such a powerful energy around you and your story. And I was like, let's do it. I'm so happy to be here talking to you today. Before we begin, let me tell you a little bit about Tiffany. We're going to be talking about your upbringing because you were raised in the Apostolic United Brethren religion, which is an offshoot from the LDS church that practices plural marriage. So we're going to be talking about that, about your upbringing. Around 19, right? You converted from, do you call it the AUB or AUB?
Well, you know what's funny about it is I actually didn't know that it was called the AUB until I was an adult because they don't call themselves AUB. They just speak about themselves as if they're like the real LDS members. Yeah. So I didn't even know that until I left and people started asking me like, what's that church called? And I was like, I actually need to look that up because I don't know. Like, yeah.
Were you calling yourself Mormon then? Okay. Yeah. Because Mormon was not a bad word at that time. Okay. So you just thought you were they thought they were like the real Mormons. Oh, yeah. Interesting. Okay. But then you did end up converting from the AUB to mainstream Mormonism around 19, got married. Before we dive into all of that, the first thing I want to ask you is, what is your intention in sharing your story? You reached out and said, I think I'm ready to talk about this. What are you hoping for in sharing this?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of power in stories, especially from people who have gone through really hard things. For me, especially having gone through multiple faith crises and faith transitions and then divorce, I think I definitely fall into that category. And I think these are things that nobody thinks that they're going to go through.
I really appreciate it because, I mean, we were talking before and I think it's normal to feel nervous, but you're like, I feel a little nervous. I'm like, it's a heavier one. Yeah. And I think that, you know, for all sorts of reasons, sometimes people can't even talk about things like this. But I think that there are a lot of people who have experienced this or similar things. And even I was reading some more about your story. I sent you some questions. I was reading it actually last night. And I was like, even though I don't have the same circumstance, there's so many pieces of your story that I can relate to. Yeah. So I think this is going to be so helpful for people. I wanted to ask why you feel ready to share and are wanting to talk about this now.
Yeah, I will say, honestly, one of the biggest reasons is I've been in that category of like a person who stays quiet and doesn't want to talk about things. And I feel like that's contributed to a lot of my struggles. And I'm trying to be better at using my voice and contributing to the conversation. So that's why now. And I feel like I'm finally at a place where I'm not owned by my trauma and I can kind of talk about it better without coming completely undone at this point. So
yeah, which is a big deal. Yeah. And I'm sure has taken a lot of work to get there. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that context. I think that's really important and really powerful. Let's go all the way back to your upbringing. First of all, can you tell the listeners more about the AUB, the Apostolic United Brethren, a little bit of history about that offshoot, who they are?
I love the history of it. I love getting into this. It's
fascinating.
It really is so fascinating.
I started down the rabbit hole and I'm like, I feel like many deep dives could be done on this.
So many deep dives. Like I could talk about this all day long, but I'll try to keep it somewhat short. So it was like in the 1850s when the church was living polygamy, and John Taylor, I believe, was the prophet. And this might actually this was later. This was a little bit later. This was
after
closer to 1900. But the government was coming down pretty hard on the church and saying, you guys need to stop living polygamy. And so John Taylor was trying to decide what to do about this. And he claims that he was visited by Joseph Smith and Jesus Christ, and they commanded him to keep the principle of plural marriage alive. And so the next day he met with, I'm sure it was the apostles, and he anointed them to be able to keep performing this practice. And over the next few years, though, like pressure was growing from the government, and they started like confiscating property, and it was just becoming a mess. And the church faced the decision to basically either be destroyed or to stop living polygamy. And so they came out with the first manifesto, which was just telling everyone, we are not going to keep living this. Obviously, if you have plural wives, don't leave your wives, but we're not going to perform new marriages. But there was, because of this revelation that John Taylor had to like keep this alive, a lot of people were still doing it. And then I think it was like 1905 when they came out with another manifesto saying, like, coming down harder and saying, if you perform plural marriages, you will be excommunicated. So that's kind of like where things split off.
When the church really came down, then this group was like, okay, we can't be part of that.
There was a group of people who were like, we know we have to keep this alive. And that the prophet at the time, I think it was Wilford Woodruff, was going against what God had said. So he's like spiritually removed from his position as a prophet. So like we need to break off and keep these principles alive. And so there's this whole break off group, and they called, originally, I think they were officially known as the Council of Friends. And then over the entire 21st century, they kind of split off into, or 20th century, sorry, they split off into many groups, but there's like 4 main groups. And the 4 main ones are Apostolic United Brethren, which is where I'm from, FLDS, which is like, I feel like most commonly known. And then another group, I don't know their official name, but we referred to them as the Kingston group, and then also the LeBaron group. And there is just so much fascinating history with these groups of people. Like, it is crazy because they're all like pretty extreme.
Is there a lot of overlap between groups? I mean, it sounds like you grew up learning about them. Did you consider these other groups who were practicing plural marriage friendly to you? Or
well, no, I think AUB very much went against, like, we are not associated with these other groups because FLDS was very extreme. If you're out on the street and you saw them, you would know. Right?
That's the group Warren Jeffs was part of.
Yes.
They wear different clothing, different hairstyles. Got it.
Exactly. And it's funny because I've heard them refer to themselves as like the most modern and like a liberal group of, which I'm like, you guys are anything but liberal, but comparatively, yes. But they, like, you wouldn't know. They dress pretty normal. Like, they do have their garments go to their wrists and their ankles. So it's like the original garments. But like they do dress pretty normal, and like they're a lot more integrated with society than like the Warren Jeffs group is. Yeah, I remember sitting down in a class one time, and one of the like Relief Society leaders was like very coming down strong, like, we are not associated with them, and like they do things that are really wrong. They marry girls off really young, and it's very like high control, and like we don't associate ourselves with that. So like if people ask you if you're FLDS, you are not FLDS.
Yeah. And you didn't want to be associated with like the bad name of, because they had a lot of bad press and
all the stuff was going on with Warren Jeffs at the time, and she was like, we're
That's
not
us.
We don't associate.
Makes sense.
So yeah.
Okay, that's a great overview. It's actually wild how little I knew about this. I mean, doing what I do, talking about Mormonism as much as I do. And when we were first talking about this and you told me about AUB, I didn't even fully understand this whole history. So that's super helpful to know. Let's talk about what it was like for you growing up in that culture, in that environment, in that doctrine. Can you tell us about your upbringing?
So in my family situation, when I was born, my mom was the first wife of 3. And when I was like 5 or 6, my dad was taking a fourth wife. She was very young. And basically how it works when you're like wanting to take a new wife, it's referred to as courting instead of like dating. But there's like a whole process you have to go to. If you're like interested in a girl, first you have to go to the priesthood and like tell them like, can I court this girl? If they say yes, then you have to go to her father. If her father says yes, then you have to ask her. And obviously if you have other wives, you also have to have consent from them. And he basically bypassed all of that. He didn't have consent from any of them. And he went ahead with this, and the whole family kind of ended up falling apart. And he just decided that he wanted to walk away from everything and just stay with his most recent wife. And so the family kind of fell apart. The second wife, which was who we were like the closest with, she was from Montana. And so they moved back to Montana, and the whole family
and her
kind
kids.
of, yes. Yeah.
So the children of the second wife of your dad, I'm assuming you considered them siblings, right? At that time.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like when your dad left with his fourth wife, you were having to split up from your siblings.
Yep. So I didn't see my siblings anymore. Like we kept in contact with the ones in Montana, but we obviously didn't see them very much. And like she just kind of wanted to stay up in Montana. And so we would talk. We visited a couple times, but not a ton of like association over the years.
And you were living in Utah?
Yes.
Okay. So where did your mom go next with you and your siblings?
So we moved in with my grandma for a while. And yeah, it was a pretty tough time for her because she wasn't getting child support. She wasn't getting any help. And he just kind of like fell off the face of the earth. Yeah, we lived with my grandma for a while. And then probably about 2 years later, she remarried again. And she was wife number 6 that time. And he had, 25 plus kids. And that was actually really exciting because after everything I'd been through, it was kind of exciting. Like, oh, I'm going to have all these new siblings and these new moms. That's when we moved to Lehi to be closer to them. And this was like around the time too that I first noticed that it wasn't normal because we did kind of have like a foot in both worlds as far as like in AUB and in the Mormon church, just because we went to public school and everyone in public school is like mainstream LDS. And so I was very familiar with both. But anyways, this was like 3rd grade, I moved to Lehi, and I had made this new friend at school, and I went to her house. I was meeting her family, and we went into her room, and I asked her, I was like, so do you only have one mom? And she was like, what? Like, and so I had told her, I was like, yeah, like my mom just got married and I have like 5 new moms and I have all these new siblings. And she obviously thought that was so interesting. And she had an older sister that was in my brother's grade, and I think he was in like 6th grade. And so she told her older sister told some people at school, and it got back to him. And he had come home one day like really upset, and he was like, are you telling people that we're polygamist? And at the time I'm like, what's polygamist? I don't even know what that is. And he explained it to me, and he was like, this is not normal. Like, you can't be telling people this. Like, people think it's weird, and we have to like be quiet about it. So from then on, I didn't talk about it.
Wow. So it was your brother. It wasn't ever told to you by your parents. Hey, this is, I don't know, I guess how you would explain it to a child, but they didn't say, don't talk about this. You just kind of learned that by
talking about it.
Yeah. Which, wow, I can only imagine how confusing when you don't even realize that the way you're living is outside the norm. And not only outside the norm, but that people have strong feelings about that lifestyle.
Yeah.
Wow. How old were you at this time when your mom remarried?
I think I was 9.
Okay.
When she remarried.
You're talking about this overlap between mainstream LDS and AUB. I'm assuming you only went to church with people from the AUB, yes?
Yes. Yeah. But kind of the way it was talked about at AUB is because I feel like the mainstream church tries really hard to like say we're not associated with these groups, but AUB kind of was more like we are associated with the LDS church. And because they don't do missionary work, and they see missionary work as kind of like the church's role. And their role is to be like the elite members of the church and to keep these like sacred principles alive.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense because maybe tell us more about the way that the doctrine of plural marriage is taught and spoken about, especially in that context.
Yeah. So, I mean, from the beginning of plural marriage, like Joseph Smith was first introduced to it when he was translating the Book of Mormon. So that was kind of what first put it in his head. And then he claimed that an angel with a flaming sword came to him and like commanded him to live this, and that he didn't want to, but he had to. And that's why it was kind of so secretive at first. Yeah, like how it was talked about is like nobody really wanted to do this, but like you had to if you wanted to get to the, not just the celestial kingdom, but like the highest degree of glory within the celestial kingdom, because their version of it is kind of like, you know, there's the three kingdoms, and in the celestial kingdom, the highest one, there's also different degrees of glory. And to get into the celestial kingdom, you have to be married. And I don't know if this is like official doctrine. This is just what I was taught in Sunday school. To get to like the second degree of glory within the celestial kingdom, you have to have at least 3 wives. And to get to the highest degree, you have to have 6+ wives.
So extra celestial points based on how many wives you have.
Yeah, which is wild because there are not enough women for even very few men to achieve that, right? So, you know, there's like half women, half men. Like if you're a woman, like you're gonna get married. You're not gonna have a problem getting snatched right up. If you're a man, you may or may not even be able to find one wife, you know, because there's
some
just
men
not
have
enough.
6 of them.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, the math doesn't check out in that
and
system.
I don't know how they think about that, but yeah, I'm like, how does that even make any sense?
Yeah, like how would that check out?
Yeah.
Okay, wow, that's really interesting I mean, you already have this kind of complex afterlife system in Mormonism, but that's interesting thinking about, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe how you viewed mainstream Mormons was like, oh, they'll still make it to heaven.
Yes.
They just won't be they'll even be in the highest degree of heaven, but not the highest degree of the highest degree of heaven because they're not practicing plural marriage.
Yeah, like they're still great people. They're still doing the right things. They just are not elite is the language that was used.
Not doing the best things.
Yeah.
And then it makes sense that you're like, oh, missionary work is good. They can go do the missionary work. They're still getting people on the right path. Did you ever talk about in the, you know, with your family or in church about plural marriage still being a principle in the eternities for mainstream Mormons? Because still, as it stands today, a Mormon man can be sealed to more than one woman.
Yep.
Also, when they die, they'll technically have more than one wife, where a woman cannot do the same. Do you remember ever learning about that?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I've learned about that, you know, since joining mainstream Mormonism. And it's something that has been such a struggle for me to understand, because I think just because the way that mainstream Mormonism speaks about these groups and about how what they're doing is so wrong. And I have had that conversation with so many people. When you come from one of these groups and you join mainstream Mormonism, you have to meet with a member of the 70. That was something that they like really push strongly on you, is like what they're doing is wrong. And like you are doing the right thing by leaving and not associating yourself with it.
They are going out of their way to say, this is bad, disavow the people that you grew up with, your parents, your family. And then you're like, but wait.
Well, and they actually took that to the level of, if you leave before you're 18 and you join mainstream Mormonism, you are not allowed to live with your family. And I think they might have changed this since, but my brother actually joined mainstream Mormonism when we were still teenagers. He had to move out. Because he could not be associated with.
They needed him to entirely disavow that lifestyle.
Yeah. And my mom was so upset about that.
Yeah, understandably. Yeah. Understandably. And interesting too to think about how AUB was actually, it sounds like quite friendly in mentality towards Mormons, mainstream Mormons, but in the reverse, it's not that way at all.
Yeah.
Let's talk about when you joined mainstream Mormonism, because it seems like a lot of this comes up here. How old were you? Where were you at in life? How did you end up there?
Yeah. So after I graduated high school, they don't super like encourage women to go to like college, mostly because you really don't get the chance, because it is like you graduate high school and you get snatched up. And most of the kids out there go to the school that's at the church. So they're even more integrated in the community. Whereas like, I'm really grateful that I at least had one foot in each so that I could kind of feel like I could choose.
They don't go to public school. They go to school that's run by who?
So like, honestly, it's like the moms who are teaching it and running it. And
got it.
Yeah.
But you were going to public school. Yeah. So you feel like that was kind
I
of
actually did try. I like tried going there and I didn't like it. It was just a shock after going to public school. And my mom luckily did let me choose like which one I wanted to go to, and I wanted to go to public school. So yeah, I did have like a foot in both worlds. It kind of scared me that like I'm graduating high school and everyone's telling me like I need to gear up and get ready to like get married, and I was not ready. And I wanted to go to college. I wanted to like get out and adventure and move out of the house for a little bit. And I applied and got into BYU Hawaii as a non-member, which meant I had to pay double tuition. So I went out to Hawaii, and almost immediately the missionaries knocked on my door. And my mentality at the time was I very much participated in a lot of the mainstream LDS events. I went to church, obviously went to church while I was out there at BYU Hawaii. And I just saw it as like more exposure to the gospel that I loved and was a part of. And I didn't see it as just this super separate thing. And so when they came and talked to me, I was like, I would love to meet with the missionaries and like learn more about the gospel. So I started meeting with the missionaries, and this is where things got really confusing for me. And I started to become exposed to that mentality of like, we are not associated with the group that you grew up in, and we don't appreciate what they're doing, and what they're doing is wrong. And they had that conversation with me really fast. And that was really disorienting to me. I was like, wait, like we're like the elite members. And I would say there was this one meeting where they took me to the temple, the La'ie temple, and they sat me down and they showed me this picture of like a monogamous family. And they were like, how does this make you feel? And I started sobbing. I told them, I was like, I want this. Like, I want this more than anything, but I can't have this because I have to be a plural wife. And every meeting, they would just push it into me harder and harder that like, it's okay to want this. It's okay to just want, your husband and not have to share him. And so I was in this really just like vulnerable, confusing situation where I'm like, how do I maybe deconstruct this belief without deconstructing everything else? And that was really hard for me. And around that same time was when I met my ex out there at BYU Hawaii, and he was very just like black and white, like same page as the missionaries, where he was like, yeah, what they're doing is wrong. You need to leave. And like, I can tell you exactly like right from wrong. And at the time that felt really safe to me because I was in such a vulnerable spot and I felt so confused and I didn't know what was true and what wasn't true. Which shouldn't have felt safe, but it did.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It also, I mean, I can only imagine the confusion of being like, okay, I'm going to meet with these Mormon missionaries because I love this gospel that we're all a part of.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it sounds like their kind of main point whether like a positive selling point or kind of a shameful where you came from is bad was monogamy. That's what they had to sell you on to get you to convert.
Exactly.
Because you agreed on everything else, right? Like Joseph Smith's a prophet, Brigham Young, even like everything else is the same.
Like I'm like, I know all of that and I read my scriptures, the same scriptures you do, you know, like everything's the same except that was the one thing that was different. And so they went hard after that one thing for sure.
You talked about finding out when you were around 9 that this was not the norm to live a lifestyle where you had multiple moms, you were in a plural marriage culture. Do you feel like you felt shame from that at that point? Or when did you start feeling, and maybe you didn't even feel shame, but like that confusion, if you can just tell me more about like when and how that developed.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say, yes, I did feel shame in the sense of like associating it with LDS members. I just kept it so secretive. You know, I didn't talk to my closest friends about it in high school. And there was a few people who knew just from elementary school, and they would still kind of like circulate the rumor, and I would like shut it down, completely disassociate with those people. Like there was a lot of shame with it at school.
Like you felt embarrassed.
I felt so embarrassed. Yeah. And everyone really did think that I was just mainstream LDS. Nobody even knew. And I just preferred to keep it that way because it was weird, but also at the same time, because of the way we were taught in AUB, I just thought of myself as like a little bit higher, which I hate that I thought that way, but that was kind of what we were taught is like, you are a member of the church. You are doing everything that you're supposed to and more.
It's a really smart way of teaching it too, because then you are still able to assimilate largely with the rest of the Mormon community. Yeah. And then even though it might feel embarrassing, you can also just kind of think, well, they just don't understand because this is, of course, they're going to think certain things about it because this is like a higher way of living. I feel like that is also mirrored in the mainstream Mormon experience when people make fun of Mormons and are like, this is silly, that's silly. Why can't you drink coffee? That's so unreasonable or irrational. It's like, well, these people just don't understand this true gospel higher way of living.
And I think if I hadn't believed it so strongly, I wouldn't have been as embarrassed by it. You know, if I hadn't believed it, it probably would have been like, yeah, like, you want to hear something cool? My parents are polygamists. Like, it probably would have been that way, but I did not want anyone to know because I believed it, and I didn't want anyone to know that I believed it because it was so weird and so different.
Yeah, but you actually fully were bought into, this is what I need to do.
Yeah, and it was really devastating when people would find out because, you know, people have their ways of finding out, and someone would confront me and I would just be like, oh my gosh, my life is over. People know.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I mean, as a teenager already, even as a young adult, it's scary and hard to be different, and especially on something like that. When you saw that photo that the missionaries showed you of monogamy, it sounds like that was a little bit of like your inner knowing of like, wait, that actually is what I want.
Yeah.
So I want to dig a little bit more into that of like the deconstruction of AUB and also the deconstruction of like polygamy and how that happened, ultimately leading to joining mainstream Mormonism.
Yeah. This was a hard one. This is one that I even struggled with the entire time that I've been in mainstream Mormonism is polygamy. And it's so funny because I have so many people who are like, why do you care so much? Like that was so far in the past. And I'm like, not for me. Like my family lived this. It's very prevalent for me. I've seen the damage that it can do, and I want nothing to do with it. And for me, like after deconstructing polygamy, like, okay, I don't believe this is right anymore. It kind of felt like pulling a string, and it was like the entire thing unraveled. Like my entire testimony began to unravel like completely against my will. And it was really scary. And I mean, this happened over 10 years, but it was just like one thing after the other. Like, well, if that doesn't make sense to me, why does this make sense to me? You know? And with polygamy, I think I came to a point where it was like, okay, one of two things has to be true. Either polygamy was supposed to happen and maybe we're just not supposed to live it today, but we will live it in the afterlife. And I don't want to go to heaven if I have to live it in the afterlife. Or we were never supposed to live polygamy. And Joseph Smith lied about that. And if he lied about that, he probably lied about everything else. And so it got to a point where I think after polygamy, it came to like revelation and the power of the priesthood. That was kind of the next thing that went, because I was like, I've heard so many contradictory things from people in AUB and leaders in the Mormon church, and things aren't lining up. Things aren't making sense. So like, it doesn't really make sense for me to believe that like they can receive revelation for me, you know?
Totally.
And then it came down to like the restoration, and like, is the restoration, did it actually happen or did it not? And at this point, I'm like, I don't think it happened.
Yeah. Well, that's actually really kind of crazy to think about. The missionaries coming in, trying to convert you to mainstream Mormonism, and really attacking polygamy and saying that's so wrong, because factually speaking, that is a giant part of the foundation of the Mormon church, started by the founding prophet of the Mormon church. So it makes so much sense that you'd be like, okay, well then, exactly as you laid it out, why would polygamy have been the right thing and is now so abhorrent and shameful, and I have to like disavow this and my brother has to move out of our house for it? Or why aren't you still practicing it? Like that, it just doesn't line up. And it's interesting that the missionaries, the Mormon missionaries trying to get you to join Mormonism, ultimately like started that unraveling of the entire thing. And I mean, polygamy for me, I think a lot of people like mainstream Mormons who weren't in a polygamist situation growing up, they end up learning about Joseph Smith and his plural wives. And there's a lot of history there that we weren't taught about how many there were and their ages and how that all happened. And that feels like really alarming to people. So I think it's a big part of deconstruction for people. Like for me, I would say it was a piece of it. But I've actually never fully considered, I mean, since leaving, I do feel like I've reflected on, okay, polygamy in heaven and how like that doesn't make sense to me, but I've never reflected on like how that in the narrative of the whole restoration, it's like polygamy was so important. Then the government says stop. And now all of a sudden it's like, nope, that has nothing to do with us.
And now the church does everything they can to disassociate themselves from polygamy. And so of course it makes sense that people are like, why do you care about this so much? Like the church isn't living it. And I'm like, it's literally part of your roots. Like this is the foundation of your church.
Yeah. What was the timing between converting to mainstream Mormonism and then getting married?
Let's see. I was baptized in August of 2014, and then I was married in April 2015. Okay. So a little less than a year.
And was your ex, was he part of like your missionary? Was he part of that experience?
Yeah, I did. I met him a little bit after I had started meeting with the missionary. So he very much contributed to, you know, a lot of the noise of everything I was going through at the time. I ended up, after that semester at BYU Hawaii, I went home for the summer and I nannied for his sister, and so was like living with her for the summer, and she was a seminary teacher, and so I was very submersed in his family and in only people who were LDS. And I eventually got to a point where I was like, I gave this so much thought. I was terrified to leave. I poured myself into scripture and prayer, trying to get like my own revelation on what I should do. And I was getting nothing, but I'm being told by everyone around me, you know, like, what could it hurt? Just try getting baptized in the church. And like, worst comes to worst, you can just go back to AUB if you don't feel like it's the right move. But getting baptized, it was the beginning of the whole thing unraveling, because there was a time at the beginning where I was confused and I was like, oh, this other right before I got baptized, I was talking to my ex's dad, and he was a convert. He also got baptized, I think when he was 19 or somewhere around there. And he told me, he was like, when I got baptized, everything changed. Like, I swear I came up out of the water and it was like the Holy Ghost was just talking to me and everything was different. And so I kind of like went in with that expectation of like, things are going to be different and I'm going to have like the real Holy Ghost with me. Nothing changed. Like
How disappointing.
It was really disappointing.
Because you're probably in all this turmoil.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, I'm just going to make the decision, take the leap, and then there will be clarity. And then there will be like, okay, this is the right thing. And so just to have that not happen, but continual confusion.
Yeah. And with all this pressure around me of just like, how did you feel? And I'm like, oh, I want so badly to be able to tell you that it was this amazing thing, but it wasn't. And I think my ex could sense a little bit of that and it scared him. But I mean, I gave it everything I had. I thought something was wrong with me. Like I internalized it as like, nothing changed for me because I'm not doing enough. Like I need to read my scriptures more. I need to pray more. Like I just dug my heels in deeper. But it was like behind the curtain. It was all just coming undone. And it took me so long to be honest with myself about like where I was at with things and to acknowledge like, I don't believe this anymore.
What was going on with your family at the time, your family of origin? Is there conflict when someone from AUB joins the LDS church? You mentioned your brother having to move out. Like, were your parents upset with you? And like, what situation was your family in as you were going through this?
My brother actually was the first one to join when he was a teenager. And then my oldest brother, he also joined about a year or two after him. And then I was the next one like a year or two after them. But I felt like I was the only sibling in the family who actually was like really in AUB and really believed it. I felt like my siblings were kind of just like whatever. And then, so yeah, it was a lot more of a process for me. Not to like invalidate their experience because I know it was hard for them too. Yeah. And after I had left, I actually had this experience like during this time when I'm just like praying, reading, trying to figure out what to do. And I was sitting in my room reading Doctrine and Covenants, and my mom came in to check on me, and I was just like in the pits. I was like, I don't know what to do. And I started crying, and I was like, I need you to like bear your testimony to me. I need like something to lean on right now because I'm just struggling. And this was the first time that I feel like my mom was honest with me about where she was at. And she told me, she was like, you know what? Like, I don't know what to tell you what to do. I don't know if this is true. Like, obviously I believe it is, but I don't know. And that rocked me so hard. And I was angry. I was like, what do you mean you don't know? Like, I'm about to commit my entire life to this and you don't know. And I don't know. And like, what do I do? And so I feel like that was really helpful for me to hear,
Yeah, I can imagine. And also, like you said, kind of like earth shattering of like, wait a second.
Like you've lived this. Yeah. You've lived this and you don't know.
Was she trying? It sounds like she wasn't trying to convince you to stay in AUB.
I mean, it was like, she would tell me, I believe that the right thing is for you to stay, but I don't know. And I'm not going to judge you if you leave. And so at that point I was like, okay, what could it hurt to just get baptized? And my mom actually ended up leaving too about a year after that.
For mainstream Mormonism?
Oh, okay. Yeah, which she's still very much a part of today.
Because she ended up divorced from your second dad that she was the sixth wife of, right? When did that happen? And what was that circumstance?
So that situation, they were only married for like 2 years before he did the same thing my dad did. He just he couldn't handle it. It was too much responsibility. He walked away from everything, went off and did his own thing. And unfortunately, like the narrative that was pushed by the rest of the family is that it was my family's fault, because once my family joined their family, things started to come undone. And we were treated very poorly because of that. And as a kid, I didn't know what was going on, but as a kid, you kind of internalize things as your fault. And I did a lot. I was like, I don't know why I'm being treated differently than everyone, but obviously it's my fault in some way or another. And they were very exclusive of us after that. And my mom did have one kid with him, which is my youngest sister. She's 10 years younger than me. And so that was kind of still she linked us to the family in that way of she was their actual sibling and they treated her as such, but the rest of us, it was go away. That was really hard for me, especially having so many abandonment issues from
the first time that
happened. And it's it's happening on this mass scale where it's I'm not just being abandoned by my stepdad, I'm being abandoned by 5 moms and 25 plus siblings who completely don't even want to associate with me anymore. And there was 2 of them that were my age that were closer to the situation. They knew me and they didn't treat me that way, luckily, but the rest of them did. And I felt they even did try to keep me a part of the family. And there was this one event where they all got together, and this was a couple years after the divorce had happened. And obviously my little sister is going to all these events, and the girl that was my age, she was oh, you should come. You're part of the family too. You should come. And I was okay, yeah. And so I went and I walked in and I got so many dirty looks from especially the older siblings of just what is she doing here? Her family ruined our family. I just felt so much coldness and judgment. And I was 12 at the time. And I didn't have a phone or anything. I couldn't call my mom to have her come pick me up. So I literally just went to the basement and sat until it was over and my mom came and picked me up. And that was that shattered my whole world. Cause I was I don't belong anywhere and nobody wants me. And just as a small child, that was so heavy, so heavy to go through.
Well, especially when you're part of a lifestyle that is already somewhat insular, that's different than the kids you're going to school with, but then also being isolated from that group that you're a part of and from family.
Yeah.
Really hard, and twice. Wow.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the monogamy stuff that you were learning from the missionaries, and then it sounds like that was kind of one of the pieces of leading you to join mainstream Mormonism, it sounds like you still really believed the principle of plural marriage, but it sounds like you had seen pretty bad,
the dark side of it.
Yeah, pretty bad examples of it hadn't really worked out for your mom twice. So what was that like, trying to reconcile, okay, this is supposed to be the thing that makes us elite, and yet this is the fruits of it?
Yeah. Well, because I did view plural marriage as something really, really hard that I was going to have to go through. I didn't really see anything good about it at the time. And I thought that it would be easier to be the second or third or whatever wife versus the first one, because the first one, you have your husband to yourself and then you have to share him. And so I kind of got it in my head that I want to be a second wife. It will be easier. And I am a very independent person. My mom raised us on her own. She taught us to be really independent. And so I basically am only going to do this because I have to, and I'm going to have kind of my own life. He can spend more time with the first wife. I just will do, this because I'm supposed to. I'll have my own kids. I'll do my own thing. I'll be very independent. I won't even be dependent on him. He can take care of his first family. So that was kind of the mentality I had. So when I'm being exposed to well, you don't have to do this and you actually can have your husband to yourself. It was, there was so much inner turmoil of is that actually okay to want that?
Well, and it sounds like the way that plural marriage was framed, at least in part, was this is hard. It is hard. That's why so few people do it. That's why only the elite do it, is because it's a difficult thing to do. And that is tricky. And I feel like mainstream Mormonism does this as well with certain things. I mean, one of the top ones that comes to mind just as an example is a mission where you get out on a mission and you're like, I'm miserable. This is literally the worst thing ever. And they're like, oh, well, it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
That's the point of it. And so that's a very disorienting thing because you're like, okay, well, I guess having so much turmoil or being so confused or not wanting this actually goes to show that it is true. And so when you're feeling like, well, I don't actually want that, you're like, well, it's not about if I want it. It's about if this is the right thing to do or not.
And it's about if it's going to make you a better person and a stronger person. And I saw plural marriage as that, like, nobody wants this 99% of the time. It's a huge dumpster fire, but it's weeding out these negative emotions that we shouldn't have, like jealousy and anger, which I view now as like they made those things way worse than they needed to be. I think it fosters more jealousy. It fosters more hatred if you let it. Obviously, you know, everyone has their choice of how they do and approach things. But from what I've observed, I'm like, I just don't think it's a good situation for anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, especially, I can only imagine when your mom has been in that situation twice, the pieces that she probably had to pick up when the dads just peace out. And now there's more women and more children who are being affected. Yeah.
And the fact that they can just peace out. I mean, because, I mean, my mom was the first wife the first time, because how it works is you can legally marry your first wife, but you obviously can't legally marry the rest of them. So you're only temple married to the rest of them. And if you are any of, you know, the second through whatever wife, you like, he can walk away and he has no responsibility to you or to your children. He doesn't have to pay child support and
zero legal obligation.
And the first time my mom was legally married to him, but he still found all the loopholes. You know, he hid his income. He didn't pay any child support. And the second time, she was the sixth wife. So it was like not even a question of whether he would have to, you know, pay child support for my little sister. It was just like, sorry, I have 30 kids. I can't pay anything. So yeah, it's really tough situation for the women in that position. And it happens a lot.
Because they have no leverage.
Yeah. And you're just left with no support and like 8 kids, you know, like, because I mean, that's your role as a woman is you get married, have kids, as many as you possibly can. They like very strongly discouraged birth control. That was like not okay in their eyes. And you had to be obedient and you had to be sweet and not cause problems. And that was your role.
Serve your husband.
And then you could just be completely abandoned and left with, you know, everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
The birth control thing what was the justification for that? Do you remember? They wanted just people to have more.
They
more kids.
believe that sex is only for procreation.
Gotcha.
And if you don't want a child, don't have sex.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow. So it feels like some of it's like the Mormonism, but more intensely so. And then it sounds like with the FLDS, it was like even more intensely so.
Yep.
So fast forwarding back to you join mainstream Mormonism, you're married now, you're still feeling confused. Sounds like even in joining Mormonism, you're still like almost deconstructing the church that you just joined. So let's talk about how that ultimately unraveled for you, how you deconstructed Mormonism, and if what you were experiencing in your marriage, if that plays into the faith deconstruction piece.
Yeah, I think it definitely played a part. I do remember like a moment of, this was probably, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, when I was kind of just playing through like, how would my life look if I left mainstream Mormonism? How would my life look if I stayed? And when I played through them, leaving was the way harder option, right? Like it would have been so much easier to just stay, but it felt like I wasn't being true to myself. And I had gone against being true to myself my entire life. And that freaked me out, you know, because I'm married. My husband is very in it. he very much sees things one way, and I'm raising kids and I'm scared and everything just feels like, obviously I wasn't ready at the time. It still took me a while to start being honest about where I was at. But around the time that I had twins, I had newborn twins.
And you had your other daughter,
I had a 2-year-old. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so 3 under 3. And I was really struggling with my mental health, as I think anyone would be in that situation.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah.
And kind of a pattern that I had in my relationship was that if I did anything that was considered out of line, I would have to be lectured for sometimes hours and hours and just berated. And until the only way to get it to stop would be to correct, even if I didn't agree with the correction, and acknowledge. We had just got done with one of these like lectures, and I was sitting on the couch and I was nursing one of my newborns, and I had the other newborn in my lap, and I think my 2-year-old was napping, and I was in the pits. Like, I was just a shell of a human, and I was just staring at the wall, and I just had tears running down my cheeks. And my ex had asked me, he was like, "What are you thinking right now?" And I was like, I just wish that I could cease to exist, honestly. Like, this is too much. I don't want to be here anymore, and I can't do this. And I started going to therapy, which was the best thing that I could have done. But it was also when things got so much harder, because I'm starting to gain the tools in therapy to start to stand up for myself, and it's just making things way worse. That's when, things got really rocky.
Because you were disrupting instead of just, okay, I'm sorry,
Yep.
I'll adjust.
Yeah.
You were learning in therapy, this is not right. And this is how I can like set my boundaries and things. You absolutely do not have to share. But I'm curious if these, like the kinds of things that you were getting lectured for or like getting punished for from your ex, were they related to like morality, or was it more just like on a relationship level? Like, did church play any part in that, or not so much?
Yeah, it did play a part in it. My relationship with God is so personal, but this was obviously something I recognized later, because at this time I was like, he's my priesthood leader. He is the head of the household. I need to obey him. And if he wants me to read my scriptures, then I better freaking read my scriptures.
While you're freaking nursing.
While
twins.
I'm, going through absolute hell with my postpartum body.
Oh my gosh. And already feeling, I'm sure if you're a believing Mormon to any degree, you already feel shame that you're not doing enough.
Yeah.
And you need a partner or someone who could say, it's okay. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
And so to have him come in and be like, more. I'm sure that toll mentally was just so immense.
Yeah, it was a lot.
What ultimately gave you the strength to leave that relationship?
Unfortunately, it took a really long time. I think I went to like 5 different therapists who told me the same thing before I actually believed them. I was so deep in the manipulation and control that it was like I was forcing myself to see things the way that he saw them, which was not rooted in reality at all. And so when I would have a therapist tell me, like, this is not a good situation and you need to think about leaving, it was like, okay, well, like, obviously you don't know the full story. You haven't heard his side. So if you haven't heard his side, like, I don't really trust you. You're kind of like one-sided. But I couldn't get him to go to therapy. So it was like, what am I supposed to do? And so I would just go to a new one, and I would be like, well, maybe a different therapist will have a different perspective. And it was the same thing every time. Things started happening that were not okay. And there was a lot of times where I would leave and come back, so many times. Yeah, it took me like 5 years from that point where I felt like I needed to leave to actually leave. And, obviously it's not a straight line. Like, it's such a roller coaster, and it's 1 step forward, 3 steps back over and over again. And it's so hard not to just focus on that 1 step forward and be like, oh, I saw like a little bit of progress. So like, maybe I can stay, maybe we can work this out. Maybe things will be different. and then 3 steps back and devastation and just
disappointment
over and over and over again. And I wish that I had left sooner, but I wish that I hadn't let things get as bad as they did. But I just try to focus on, I'm proud of myself for leaving.
So proud of you. I mean, just thinking of the situation you're in, it's logistically, I mean, we were talking about this in context of plural marriage, and just logistically speaking, I know people in my own life who logistically, they don't feel like it's possible to get a divorce, whether that's financial, whether that's kids, whether
and when
that's
you're being
living situation.
Threatened, you know, like I will take your children away from you if you leave. That's a whole nother layer of impossible, you know?
I might actually get, if I leave, then I'm not going to be able to see my kids anymore. You mentioned, as we've been talking before this, you've mentioned feeling like there were things that maybe made you particularly vulnerable to this type of abuse, and wanting to share and talk about those things as a means of education for people. What do you think those things are?
So I think a big thing that played a role for me was like my family dynamics growing up, that in addition to all of the other things. But I think being in a situation where I was so young and my mom had gone through so much and she was on her own, I think what can often happen is that the mom will like emotionally lean on the eldest. And when that happens, it can kind of create a mess where the rest of the kids feel really neglected. And also because she wasn't getting any financial support, she had to work most of the time. And so we were left to fend for ourselves a lot. And unfortunately, because of kind of the superiority dynamic that created among like older siblings, there was unfortunately like a lot of bullying going on, especially towards me and my sister, who's just a year younger than me. I was just really used to a certain type of treatment. And because when you mix that with, you know, what I'm being told about men and priesthood and how they're superior and how I need to listen and be obedient to them, I'm attracting these types of relationships in adulthood where that's being reaffirmed. That type of treatment is still in play. And I very much just thought it was a me problem, not a problem with the people who are treating me this way. I just was like, there's obviously something wrong with me that I need to figure out, you know, and that's why I went to 5 different therapists, because I'm like, it's me. I know it's me. Like, I need to figure out what it is in me that is the issue. And I'm being told, you know, the same thing over again of like, it's not you, trust me. But I do think that growing up in that environment really contributed to being used to being treated that way and taking so long to leave because that was so normal to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that feeling of, I feel like with what I understand about emotional abuse and manipulation is like, even with, you know, a therapist telling you like, this is not normal. You don't deserve this. You're like, well, but deep down, I know that I do. So I'm going to go seek out another therapist who can just tell me what I can fix, what I can do to fix this thing, because it has to be me. Oh, I'm so sorry you felt that way. And I think that, what you're saying with those factors of growing up and then having this added layer of, well, if my priesthood authority is telling me this, then like it's not only just this person, but there's, I think, people use that as an added layer of manipulation of like, well, whether they're explicitly saying it or not, it's like, well, they're the ones that are supposed to be in charge. So who am I to push back on this?
Yeah. And even after I left and had gotten married, I had this friend who had gotten married around the same time. And we're both going through our first year of marriage, and she's having kind of a rocky like first year of marriage. And my first year of marriage was actually really good. We didn't have any issues, because I was obedient. I did anything he wanted me to do. And we would kind of have conversations about our relationships, and she was telling me like kind of about their issues and what they were going through. And I used that situation to reaffirm my beliefs in a way of like, see, that's what happens when you don't respect your priesthood leader, when you are not listening to him and being obedient, like you're going to have problems. And the funny thing now is that like they're super happily married 10 years later. And I'm just like, yeah, okay. Like I definitely can see how toxic my thoughts were around all that. And like, yeah.
No, but it really makes sense. Like I think even not having so many added layers of what you experienced, there's still just like to this day, a little voice in the back of my head that is like, defer to the men, defer to the husband, defer to, if there's a man in the room, defer to them. I mean, that was so not only taught explicitly, but also just in the communities we grew up in, which I'm imagining it might have even been exacerbated within a plural marriage situation. It's just like the deference to men is, even if you rationally are like, you know, me sitting here today, I'm like, obviously fucking not, but in that like can still kick in. So I think that makes so much sense. Do you feel like there was a heightened gender role dynamic in the plural marriage culture?
Oh, for sure. And I was just going to say one other thing too, with living that way, where it's like you're always deferring to your priesthood leader. Like you can only live that way for so long before you either completely lose yourself or you leave and change the dynamic, you know? And that was the decision I faced. But with gender roles, there are definitely like, I can definitely say there are some good men out there who like really treat everyone with respect, but more often than not, the men out there are very, very toxic, and women are treated as if they are just eternal slaves whose responsibility is again to pop out kids and be obedient and just be there to help them like further the work. And, you know, that just was your role as a woman.
It makes sense that in the situation where one man has multiple wives, that is heightened, because it's just like, well, it's almost like in that situation, the man is inherently deserving of like multiple women to help take care of him and to give him children and to take care of his household. I'm curious too if there's like this mentality that's maybe heightened because there's so many children and wives to go around, and there's only one man. So the access to that man is probably like more prized.
Oh yeah. He's very much put on a pedestal in that way. And is like, when you think about polygamy, it does seem like it's very advantageous for the man. But in the grand scheme of things, it's also very problematic for them in the way that it puts them on a pedestal. Because, I mean, like my dad's example, he left and he's thrown into this world where he suddenly is not superior and he's on the same level as everyone else. And he lived a really, really difficult life. And he actually ended up taking his life when I was like 23. And it's really heartbreaking to see men who were so bought into it leave and try to have a normal life. It's really, really hard.
Wow, I didn't even think about that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Like the jarring reality of like, wait, outside of this world, I'm just like anybody else.
Yeah. And that's the thing, I mean, for even men who leave mainstream Mormonism, like maybe on a smaller degree, but it's like suddenly you're not this like respected and revered priesthood leader.
Priesthood person.
Yeah, you're just normal. And how do you deal with that? It creates a lot of narcissism.
Yeah.
So
well, and also within the system, it sounds like both your dad and your stepdad couldn't handle the pressure of it. Because I'm also thinking like providing for that many people and the pressure of, I mean, not to center the men in the situation, but it also sounds like a difficult position to be in with the pressure.
For sure.
And it sounds like a lot of men can't hack it once they find themselves in that position too.
It's not a good situation for anybody.
Would you say you like officially left Mormonism? Like when did you stop going to mainstream Mormon church?
That's complicated because I do still attend sometimes actually, and I do have a relationship with it in the sense that it is very important to my ex. It's still something he's very much a part of. It's something that my kids will be a part of in that way. And so for me right now, it really is just, I'm letting my kids kind of like lead the show, because it is really hard to be in Utah and not have any association with the church. Like all of their friends go to church, and like my oldest is 7 and she wants to get baptized. And I don't think it's helpful for me to push back and be like, no, this isn't true. Like, you know, so I just try to have a lot of conversations with them about like, you get to decide what you believe and what you don't believe. And if something doesn't sit right with you, if it feels weird, like that is your inner voice telling, like guiding you, and you need to listen to that. And like, you don't have to believe everything that they teach you. So yeah, I don't even think that I've officially left.
Yeah.
But I just for sure don't believe it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, still very much a part of it. And I actually did really love being part of the LDS church. I loved the structure of it, and I loved the community of it. And in some ways, I still kind of hold on to those things, and I'm grateful for those things. But yeah.
No, I think that's complicated. Well, and especially when you're in a co-parenting situation, when you have family members still attached to it, I think that that's a really wonderful way to navigate it. And I think that, as being able to tap into, I just interviewed someone a few weeks ago who she considers herself a secular Mormon.
Did you listen to that? It was so good. Oh my gosh. I loved everything that she had to say.
I feel like I feel really inspired by her, and it was an interesting experience because the reaction to her, I feel like, was very heightened from people who are ex-Mormon, which I imagined it would be, but I felt like it was an important reflection for me personally, and hopefully for people like me who I tend to be very like, you know, I could never, black and white, very like, which I think, you know, everyone lands in their own position. But I think it was a really good reminder for me that everyone's on their own journey with this. And there's so many different ways that people can relate to it and like find ways to relate to it. And I'm imagining that you had you kind of were like just an unorthodox Mormon your whole life, being in the AUB, right?
Exactly.
And so it's like that maybe can come more naturally or be a little bit more doable for you because you've already kind of related to Mormonism in an unorthodox way your whole life.
Yeah. I very much participated in both. I went to 2 girls' camps and 2 treks and tried to be a participant in both of them. And one thing that I loved that she had said on your podcast was when she talked about the girls that I think she was like in the relief side or the
girls. She
young
was at
women's
girls camp. Yeah.
And she felt like she needed to protect these women like within the church. And I feel similarly about that with my girls, of like, whether I'm in or out, like they're going to be exposed to this. And it doesn't feel as helpful for me to be like trying to help them from the outside. Like, I feel like I can make more of an impact, you know, being very like, you get to choose if you want to be a part of this, I support you and I will do this with you, you know?
Yeah.
But
being involved in their journey with it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Where do you feel like you are at in your healing journey? You've talked about a lot of childhood trauma, 2 faith crises and deconstruction, divorce. How do you feel in terms of healing right now?
Yeah. So last year was really, really tough. I did end up in a situation where it was like resources were ripped away and I didn't know how I was going to be able to pay for groceries or put gas in my car. And the stress of that very much put me in survival mode for a long time. And so it's taken so long to even get to a point where I feel like I can start to heal, but I am doing a lot better now and have gotten myself in more of a stable situation. And luckily I've had really supportive friends. I think that was another thing that was hard going through it, is how disappointing the lack of support from family members was. It was very disorienting, you know, because it's like, I've never gotten that support from them that I needed, but you always kind of hope that in your darkest moment, you know, they'll show up for you. And when they didn't, it was a whole nother level of disorienting, especially when they're contributing to that mindset of like, maybe this is her fault, you know, and me being like, oh my gosh, like, is this my fault? Like, and so that was harder than like the divorce itself. Like it was so, yeah, just like my own family members, really, really tough. And I am really close with my sisters and they have been supportive, and my mom. But other than that, it's hard not to focus on the ones who didn't, you know?
Yeah, of course.
But also I've had a lot of friends who have really stepped in and helped, and I'm so grateful to them. Yeah. So I would say today, like, I'm in a much better place. I have the support that I need finally, and am getting my life back together on my own. So
I'm just in awe of that whole journey. I think that, yeah, there's my insight into that experience is my mom and my dad separated when I was 13, but my dad was pretty out of the household for most of my upbringing. So she just had to figure it out. She had to figure out the money. She had to figure out like how to keep things moving. And she did have a lot of support from family, which those resources and maybe the lack thereof can also really intensify that situation. So I'm just truly in awe. And I sense from you, even from the first time we met, I was just telling my husband Bentley as he was setting us up, but we met at the museum, at the Thanksgiving Point Museum, and you have twin girls and I have twin girls, and they're like a year apart and well, almost 2 years apart. But I was like, twins, I have like a twin radar, and I was like, your twins are so cute. And we just got to chat. And I sense a quiet strength about you that is just so admirable. And I'm just really appreciative and honored that you have shared that with me and shared that with the girls' camp community. Yeah. I do want to ask if you have any advice, anything you would want to say to people who are maybe in a similar situation, or, you know, not maybe in that exact situation, but where they can relate to those feelings you're describing of feeling like they're not enough, or that they don't deserve these things that they want out of life. What do you feel like you've learned that you could share?
So many things. I feel like the best advice I could give is to try not to sit in the victimhood for too long. Because if you are in a situation where you're not getting support from your family and friends, like, you have to go out and find that. Like, you have to find a way to be supported. You can't do it on your own. And that aspect is so important. And I would say, like, a couple things that I've done to kind of speed the process along. There's a lot of books on this topic. The one I really liked was called Why Does He Do That? And there's a version of it it's called Daily Wisdom for Why Does He Do That? And it's like daily affirmations. And it helped me rewire my thought process so much of like, what is coming from me and what is coming from him, what's coming from religion, like just separating all these things out. And so that book was really, really helpful. There's another book called It's Not You. And it took me, I think it's Dr. Ramani, I think is her name. It took me a long time to read that book because I had my friend's mom recommend it to me a while back when I was still so deep in It Is Me. And just hearing that title was actually really triggering to me. I was like, I can't read that. Like, that's just like, that's not gonna help things. You know, I need to save my marriage. I need to like take responsibility. And so I don't love the title of that book, but it did really help me to realize that it's not me.
Yeah.
Gosh, after going through everything, I just have so much fire in me, and maybe it comes from anger, to be able to find some way to help people in this situation, especially like hopefully with like immediate resources, which is something, it gets ripped away from you. And yes, there are, things like programs and things you can apply for, but they take so much time and so much work. And gosh, those first couple months were so rough trying to figure out, how I'm going to feed my kids and where am I going to live. And so I don't know whether it's like a nonprofit or something. I'd really like to get involved in some way in helping support women through that situation. But I would say like also just like listening to yourself, that's like, it's so common sense, right? But it's not for a lot of women growing up in Utah and in these communities. You are taught to do anything but listen to yourself because you have to go against the natural man, and the natural man is an enemy to God. And I just think, I don't know, like in those situations, more often than not, like people will learn, you have to listen to yourself or you're going to have a lot of problems. So I would say listen to yourself. And yeah, I think that's
beautiful advice. I've also heard about, I had written, I was going through my notes and I had written, what was the first book you talked about? Why does he do that?
Why does he do that?
I was like going to clean through my notes and I had written that down as a recommendation that I wanted to pass along to a friend. And I was like, I just read it in my notes and it just said, why does he do that? And I'm like, first of all, unfortunately, that could apply to a lot of situations that I was like, why does he do that? Yeah, makes sense. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, what was this? And I actually posted it to my stories because someone asked how I keep track of things. And I'm like, my notes app, and it's not a great system. Then my friend DM'd me and she's like, that's that book I told you about. Yeah. I've heard about that book like multiple times in the past couple of months. And I've also heard about the It's Not You book. So I think that's fantastic resources. And yeah, I love what you're saying about reconnecting to your inner voice, because it does seem so simple. Like, well, just, listen to yourself, believe yourself even. But it goes against years and years and years and years of conditioning. I mean, you mentioned that scripture, natural man is an enemy to God. There's so many scriptures. There's so many conference talks or things that an adult figure said to us growing up that were the opposite of that. And so as simple as it may seem, it actually is incredibly difficult. And I think it takes an immense amount of work. And I really admire, it sounds like you've really been doing that work as you've been in the midst of all of this. Yeah. And I think that that's incredibly admirable, especially for your kids, because I think they will feel the effects of that. I know that they will and that they do.
Thank you. I will say one other thing too. If you are not someone who has or ever will go through this situation, I think it is still so important to educate yourself and be aware, because gosh, like these women need support and we need to be able to step in and recognize the signs. And that's something I hope I can foster more of, is just like, gosh, do better, like we're just leaving these women for dead, basically, these women with kids. And it's like, we need to do more. We need to do better.
Yeah, I really appreciate you calling that piece of it out, because I don't know much about like the programs that be, but I do know that sometimes people are like, oh, well, I don't know, go to a women's shelter or something. And it's like, well, in practicality, I think it's very, very different than that. And yeah, just so much work I can only imagine that needs to be done. And yes, there's the government side of it. And then there's also just this personal side of it of being aware and making sure that the people in your lives know that you're a safe place to come and to be when someone is going through that.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a lot of people who were aware of the situation as I was going through it, but couldn't or didn't know what to do about it. And I did have one friend she was a domestic violence advocate of some sort at one point, and she stepped in and gave me so much support and just education about the situation, and that was very helpful.
This is something I've had on my mind. I almost went a whole episode without mentioning Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, but I'm about to at the final hour. Just thinking about the pressure to stay in a marriage and just like preserve the marriage at all costs, and how I think that is internalized, but that's also like unfortunately something that exists in the community as well. And I've noticed in like certain situations I've witnessed, it's almost like, oh, like we don't want to deal with this. So just try and work it out. Just try and stay, even if that's not what's best for the person in the situation and their children. It's just like, well, just stay so we don't have to like figure all of this out.
Yeah. And that was something that was pushed in me so deeply as a kid, watching my mom go through divorce twice. It was like, whatever you do, do not get divorced. It will like ruin your life, is basically kind of the message that I was receiving. And so my version of that was like, how can I weed out anything in me that could make me hard to be married to, or, you know, make this harder for me in any way? Like, my way of never getting divorced was just to completely submit myself and be obedient, which is where I mentioned at the beginning that I was so off the mark with thinking that I was prepared to go into all of this.
Yeah. Do you think the plural marriage upbringing played a part in that too? Because it was just like, that's, you submit.
Yeah.
And marriage is just like the ultimate, a woman serves to like be in a marriage ultimately.
Yeah. And I also had that perspective of like, when things are really hard, I'm like, it would be way harder to be a plural wife right now. Like, why am I making such a big deal of monogamy? But the reality is that most plural marriages were not having, I mean, a lot of them are having the same things going on, but it didn't mean I was in an easier situation just because I didn't have a sister wife. That definitely would have made things trickier.
Yeah. Maybe in some ways could have made things easier in some ways too.
Yeah. There have been some points in my life where I'm like, you know, like a sister wife actually might be really helpful right now. Like being able to divide housework and take turns making dinner and like switch off babysitting, like
even validate each other if the husband is being a certain way, being like, wait a second, and like being able to like have an extra witness to that even.
Yeah, that was kind of the case in like my mom's situation. I feel like my dad kind of pitted those two against each other a lot. And one day they finally realized like, oh, hey, like our relationship isn't the problem. Like he's the problem and we should be working together
against that problem.
Yeah. And so they became really close and they're still really close today. But I think that's kind of a funny story.
That's actually really sweet. Yeah. I've learned so much from you. And I mean, truly, there's so many different like themes and like threads of your story. And one thing I'm really thinking about is also just how problematic it is to center marriage as the epitome of existence, especially the epitome of a woman's existence, and putting women in these situations. I just think women shoulder the burden of getting married and then preserving marriages. And I think it's part of like decentering men too, is just like decentering marriage. And that is, you know, you have the men being centered in the upbringing, you have marriage being centered in an extra way. And that's something I'm reflecting on too, of like, just the way that the Mormon culture treats marriage, regardless of if the marriage is a good one or not. It's like kind of feels irrelevant sometimes. It's just like, well, maintain the marriage because that's what you have to do.
Yeah, you endure to the end.
Yes. And speaking of those levels of heaven where we started, it's like you have to be married to make it to the highest one. And that's really crazy.
It is.
Because why would your own personal, I mean, I think that's what I find one of the things I find so inspiring about you is like the personal growth and returning to self and focusing on your personal development, I think is just so huge. And it just feels completely insane to me from this vantage point to think that like, in order to make it to the highest degree of anything, you would have to like have a man with you,
right?
You know?
Yeah.
And I think, it's just very inspiring to do that personal work. And I could keep going forever and ever.
So could I, man.
Thank you.
So much I could go on about.
I know. We might have to I honestly do want to do like more of a historical deep dive.
Yeah.
Truly, if you're willing, I would love to do like, I mean, we've touched on a lot of it here, but I would love to do like a really thorough breakdown of the history of the different like sects of do you feel like polygamy, I keep saying plural marriage, do you feel like polygamy is like a little bit derogatory, or do you, like, if someone is like polygamous, like how do you prefer it to be referred to?
Yeah, I do feel like they kind of see it as a little bit derogatory. Yeah. It's never referred to as polygamy. It's always plural marriage. That was why the first time I heard it, I was like, I don't even know what that means.
Has a connotation, it seems like.
It does. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's meet up back here soon and do a whole historical deep dive. But thank you for sharing this, sharing your heart, sharing your story. I will link all those resources that you mentioned so people know where to find them. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Bye.
Bye.
GIRL.